He's my husband now, not your son. Camila's words echoed in my mind like a death sentence. I stood paralyzed, the serving spoon still in my hand, before the table I'd set with such care. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas lowered his eyes, his cheeks flushed with shame, and I felt as if the floor had dropped out from under me. There I was, Helen, 62 years old, humiliated in my own home by a woman I barely knew, a woman who had stolen my son and was now trying to erase me from his life. The cake baking in the oven began to burn, but I couldn't move. It was as if all the years of love, dedication, and sacrifice I'd made for Lucas had been reduced to ashes in that moment. Camila's cold smile was a knife, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely invisible to my own son. That rainy March afternoon didn't start differently from so many others I'd dreamt of in the past 6 months. I woke up early, as I always do, and dedicated the entire morning to preparing a special lunch. I chose each detail with the care of an artist, the tablecloth embroidered by my grandmother, which Lucas always complimented when he was little, the yellow flowers he said reminded him of the sun, and his favorite dish, the beef stroganoff he'd begged me to make on his birthdays. While seasoning the meat, I thought about how quickly everything had changed. Just a year ago, Lucas still lived with me in this same house where he grew up, where we laughed, cried together, where we built a bond I believed to be unbreakable. I was born into a simple family, the daughter of a shopkeeper and a seamstress. I learned early on that love is shown through gestures, care, and presence. When I married Robert, Lucas's father, at 24, I had big dreams. We wanted to have many children, a large, noisy family. But life had other plans. After 3 miscarriages that nearly broke me completely, Lucas arrived like a miracle. I was 28 when he was born, and from the moment I held him in my arms, I knew he would be not only my son, but my reason for being. Robert was a good, hard-working man, but always absent. He traveled a lot for work, and even when he was home, he seemed to be miles away. That's how Lucas and I became inseparable. I was his confidant, his first teacher, his biggest cheerleader. When he had nightmares, he'd run to my bed. When he achieved something at school, I was the first person he wanted to tell. When Robert died in a car accident, Lucas was only 16, and we both had to learn to navigate the world without him. Those were difficult years, but they were also the most precious years of my life. I worked 2 jobs as a secretary to ensure Lucas had everything he needed. I gave up relationships, travel, personal dreams, but I never felt I was sacrificing anything. I was building something. I was building an honest, caring man who would be my lifelong companion. And for a long time, that's exactly what it was. Lucas graduated with an engineering degree, got a good job, and even when he moved into his own apartment, we spoke every day. He'd come for lunch with me on Sundays, tell me about his girlfriends, ask for advice on work. I was his confidant, his safe haven, and then Camila appeared. The first time Lucas brought her to meet me, 2 years ago, I tried to like her. I really did. She was beautiful, well-dressed, polite, at least on the surface. But there was something in her eyes, a calculated coldness, that deeply bothered me. The way she looked around my house, as if she were evaluating every object, every picture on the wall. The way she interrupted Lucas when he told a story about our life, abruptly changing the subject. Small signs I tried to ignore, because I wanted my son to be happy. Over the months, I began to notice changes in Lucas. He seemed more tense, more reserved. Our conversations, which once lasted for hours, became short and superficial. When I asked about Camila, he would answer evasively, as if he were walking on eggshells. "She's fine, Mom. Working hard. Working hard." What exactly does she do? I never got a straight answer. The visits started to become less frequent. First, Lucas missed a Sunday. Then he started arriving later, and leaving earlier. Camila almost never came along, always having an excuse, a work meeting, a family visit, a headache. When she did come, she was glued to her phone, texting, as if being there was an unbearable obligation. The engagement was announced abruptly, in a quick phone call. "Mom, Camila and I are getting married. We want something simple, just close family." Simple meant I barely participated in the preparations. Camila made all the decisions, chose the venue, the menu, even my dress was suggested by her. On the wedding day, I felt like a foreign guest at my own son's ceremony. It was after the wedding that everything completely deteriorated. The calls stopped, Sunday lunches became a thing of the past. When I called, Camila answered and said Lucas was busy, that he would return the call, a call that never came. On the rare occasions when I managed to speak to him, Lucas seemed rushed, distant. "Mom, I'm busy, I'll call you later," but later never came. And then came that March afternoon, when I finally convinced him to come for lunch. I spent days planning everything, buying ingredients, cleaning the house until every surface gleamed. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted to win my son back, to show that our connection still existed. When they arrived, I immediately felt the tension in the air. Lucas hugged me quickly, but seemed restless. Camila walked in, without a greeting, went straight to the sofa, and started messing with her phone. I tried to make conversation, asking about his work, the honeymoon, their plans for the future. Monosyllabic answers, forced smiles. During lunch, Lucas praised the food with his usual enthusiasm. "Mom, this beef stroganoff is perfect. It reminds me of when I was little, and you made it on my birthday." For a moment, I saw a glimmer in his eyes, the genuine connection we'd always shared. And it was at that moment that Camila dropped the bomb. "He's my husband now, not your son." The silence that followed was devastating. Lucas blushed, mumbled something about the food being delicious, and tried to change the subject. But I had heard clearly. I had understood perfectly. This woman wasn't just marking her territory, she was declaring war on me. And the worst part was that my son, my Lucas, didn't say anything in my defense. I finished serving dessert like an automaton. I smiled, made small talk, behaved like a polite hostess. But inside, I was shattered. When they left, I locked myself in my room and cried like I hadn't cried since Robert died. These weren't just tears of sadness, they were tears of anger, of humiliation, of a pain so deep it felt physical. In the following days, I made a decision that went against all my maternal instincts. I distanced myself. I stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped trying to schedule meetings. If that's how they wanted it, if my presence was so unwelcome, then I would give them the space they asked for. But each day of silence was torture. I would wake up wondering if I should call, spend the day controlling myself to avoid picking up the phone, and go to sleep with a heavy heart. Weeks turned into months. I tried to keep busy. I intensified my Pilates classes, enrolled in a cooking course, started volunteering at the church. But nothing filled the void Lucas had left. It was as if a part of me had been amputated. Maria, my best friend for over 20 years, tried to comfort me. "Helen, you need to live your life. Lucas is a grown man now. He has the right to make his own choices." I knew she was right in theory, but my heart couldn't accept it. How could I simply switch off 34 years of maternal love? How could I pretend I didn't care about my son's well-being? Social media became a source of self-imposed torture. I saw pictures of Lucas and Camila traveling, dining in expensive restaurants, always smiling for the camera. But I knew my son better than anyone, and there was something forced about those smiles. His eyes didn't shine like before. There was a tension in his shoulders that I recognized from his stressful teenage years. If you have experienced similar situations in your family, know that you are not alone on this journey. Keep following these accounts, as I believe that sharing our experiences can help us find the strength and wisdom to face the challenges of family relationships. It was during one of those sleepless nights, almost a year after that fateful lunch, that I received Clara's letter. Clara had been my neighbor for almost 15 years, until she moved to another neighborhood when she retired. We didn't keep in regular contact, just an occasional Christmas card. So, seeing her name on the envelope surprised me. The shaky handwriting and the urgency of the message made my heart race. "It's about your son. There are things you need to know, and it's not safe to write." What kind of danger could involve Lucas? My imagination soared to the most terrible scenarios. Drugs, debts, blackmail. I spent the night awake, creating increasingly dramatic theories. The next day, I called Clara, and we arranged to meet at a discreet cafe downtown. When I saw her, I almost didn't recognize her. Clara had always been an elegant, well-groomed woman, but now she seemed to have aged 10 years. She was nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder, as if expecting to be followed. "Helen, I didn't know if I should seek you out," she began, her hands trembling slightly as she held her coffee cup. "But my conscience won't let me rest. I've known Camila's family for many years. Her father, Antonio, was my neighbor when I lived in the old neighborhood." Clara paused, as if weighing her words carefully. Antonio was always a questionable man, involved in shady businesses, always with a lot of money, but nobody knew exactly where it came from. Camila grew up in that environment. She learned early on how to use people, to manipulate situations to get what she wanted. My stomach churned. What does this have to do with Lucas? Camila didn't choose your son out of love, Helen. She chose him out of self-interest. She learned he inherited a considerable sum from his grandfather, that he owns a house downtown, that he's financially stable, and most importantly, she learned he has a mother who loves him unconditionally and would be easy to manipulate into backing off. Clara's words fell upon me like an avalanche. Everything was starting to make sense. The comments about my interference, the insistence that Lucas distance himself from his old friends, the way she always changed the subject when I asked about her job. "But there's more," Clara continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Last week, I saw Lucas at the hospital. He was alone, in the psychiatric emergency room. He looked devastated, lost. When I approached him, he pretended not to see me, and left quickly." My heart stopped. Psychiatric emergency room? My Lucas, who was always so balanced, so strong. "Clara, are you sure about what you're telling me?" She nodded gravely. "Helen, I think your daughter-in-law is psychologically destroying your son. And the worst part is that he probably doesn't even realize what's happening. This kind of manipulation is subtle, gradual. The person loses the ability to discern, to trust their own feelings." I left that meeting in a state of shock. On the way home, my mind was buzzing with plans, possibilities, an explosive mix of anger and determination. If Camila thought she could destroy my son with impunity, she had chosen the wrong mother to face. I started investigating discreetly. I called Lucas's old colleagues, under the pretense of planning a surprise birthday party. I discovered that he had distanced himself from all his close friends. Nobody had seen him for months. I spoke to the superintendent of the building where they lived, feigning interest in an apartment in the same complex. I learned that they lived in isolation, that Camila received many strange visitors, always well-dressed men arriving in expensive cars. The most revealing investigation happened when I gained access to public property records. The house Lucas had inherited from his grandfather, our beach house, where we spent all his childhood summers, had been sold 6 months after the wedding. The money from the sale had been transferred to an account in Camila's name. That was the last straw. My son was being systematically stripped of everything: his friendships, his family, his inheritance, his identity. And I had stood still, respecting a space that was actually a prison. I decided to act. First, I hired a private investigator to get more information about Camila's activities. The reports I received in the following weeks were even worse than I imagined. Camila was having extramarital affairs, was involved in money laundering schemes through shell companies, and there was a pattern in her behavior. She had been married twice before, always to men of good financial standing, always ending the relationships after financially draining them. But the most shocking information came on a rainy Thursday. The investigator showed me photos of Lucas leaving a psychiatrist's office, visibly shaken. According to the report, he was being treated for severe depression and panic attacks. My son, who had always been my rock, my source of joy, was destroyed. That night, I made a decision. I wrote a letter to Lucas, not a text message that Camila could intercept, but a physical letter, which I would deliver in person to his office. In it, I poured out my heart. I talked about the unconditional love I had always felt for him, about how I respected his choice to distance himself, but that I now knew that this choice had not really been his. "My dearest son," I wrote, "I know it's been a long time since we've had a real conversation. I respected your decision to create distance, but now I've discovered that this distance wasn't your choice. It was an imposition. I know about Grandpa's house. I know about your emotional problems. I know you're not okay. I want you to know that, regardless of what happened between us, you will always have a safe harbor in me. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here. 2 weeks went by without an answer. I was starting to think my plan had failed when, on a Tuesday night, my phone rang. It was Lucas. "Mom, can we talk? It's important." His voice was different, weaker, laden with a sadness that broke my heart. "Of course, my son, whenever and wherever you want. Now, at the park where you used to take me to play when I was little. I need to get out of the house." I arrived at the park 15 minutes later. Lucas was sitting on the same bench where we used to talk when he was a teenager. But the man I saw there bore little resemblance to the strong, confident son I knew. He was thin, pale, with deep dark circles under his eyes. His hands trembled slightly. When he saw me, he started to cry. Not a discreet cry, but deep, desperate sobs from someone who had been holding everything in for a long time. "Mom, I messed everything up. I messed up my life. I messed up our relationship. I don't know how it got to this point." I sat beside him, and instinctively, he rested his head on my shoulder as he used to do when he was little. "Lucas, tell me what's going on." And then he told me everything. How Camila had gradually undermined his self-confidence, convincing him that I was possessive, that our relationship was sick. How she isolated him from friends, always with convincing excuses. This friend was envious, that one was a bad influence, his mother wasn't letting him grow up. How she controlled his finances, his decisions, even his emotions. She said that if I didn't completely distance myself from you, she would tell lies about me to everyone. That she would invent stories about abuse. That she would destroy my career. And I believed her, Mom. I was so confused, so insecure, that I believed that maybe she was right, that I was really too dependent on you. And now she's pressuring me to sell the apartment too, saying we need money for her investments. But I've found out there are no investments, Mom. The money just disappears. I held his face in my hands, as I used to do when he was a child, and needed comfort. "Lucas, you don't need to carry this alone anymore. I'm going to help you get out of this situation." "But how, Mom?" She said that if I try to leave her, she'll invent that I assaulted her, that I have mental problems. Nobody will believe me. It was at that moment I realized the extent of the psychological manipulation my son had endured. Camila hadn't just stolen his money, she had stolen his ability to believe in himself, to trust his own judgment. "My son, I have information that will change everything. Camila isn't who she pretends to be, and we're going to prove it." In the following weeks, we carefully constructed our plan. With the help of a private investigator, we gathered evidence of Camila's fraudulent behavior. We discovered she maintained secret bank accounts, and was legally married to someone else in another state, rendering her marriage to Lucas technically invalid. The final confrontation took place on a sunny Friday in June. Lucas had arranged a dinner at home, saying he wanted to talk about the future with Camila. I was hidden in the neighbor's apartment, with access to the intercom, ready to intervene at the right moment. Camila arrived radiant, probably imagining Lucas would finally succumb to the pressure to sell the apartment. But when she entered the living room, she found not only Lucas, but also the investigator, a lawyer, and all the evidence of her fraud spread across the table. The mask fell instantly. The sweet, manipulative woman gave way to a furious, desperate creature. She screamed, threatened, tried to turn Lucas against me once more. "This is your mother's fault. She never wanted you to be happy. She made all this up." That's when I entered the room. "Camila," I said with a calmness I didn't know I possessed, "it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." What followed was the most intense confrontation of my life. Camila tried every trick, crying, manipulation, threats. But for the first time, Lucas wasn't alone. He had support, he had evidence, he had the strength that comes from knowing the truth. "You turned my life into a living hell," he said, his voice finally firm. "You isolated me from the people I love, stole my money, made me doubt my own sanity. But it's over. I want you out of my life now." The police had already been called. Camila was taken in for questioning regarding the fraud. Her previous marriage was exposed, automatically invalidating her union with Lucas. The money from the beach house was recovered through legal proceedings. But more important than legal justice was my son's recovery. In the following months, we worked together to rebuild our relationship, and more importantly, to rebuild Lucas's self-esteem and confidence. He went to therapy, dealt with the trauma of the psychological manipulation, learned to trust his own feelings and instincts again. Today, 2 years after that confrontation, Lucas is once again the strong, confident man I raised. He has made new friends, resumed hobbies he had abandoned, and is rebuilding his emotional and financial life. Our relationship not only recovered, it became even stronger, tempered by the adversity we faced together. I learned that maternal love sometimes needs to transform into a warrior's spirit, that respecting our children's choices doesn't mean passively accepting when they are being manipulated and harmed. That true protection sometimes requires the courage to confront forces that try to destroy those we love. Lucas recently told me that my unwavering love and my refusal to give up on him saved him. Even when I couldn't see the truth, Mom, you kept loving me. You fought for me when I didn't have the strength to fight for myself. This experience taught me that silence isn't always golden. Sometimes we need to make noise, we need to fight, we need to rise up like lionesses defending our cubs. And that the bond between mother and son, when built on solid foundations of true love and mutual respect, can withstand even the most devastating storms. Today, when I see other mothers going through similar situations, I don't hesitate to offer support and encouragement, because I learned that our strength as women and as mothers is greater than any force that tries to separate us from those we love. And that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept silence when our heart screams that something is wrong.